Hey, this is Yazuki Wolf, and I've been playing Skyrim VR quite a lot. You may have noticed on my channel that I've been putting a lot of Skyrim VR videos out, and usually I don't commit myself to one game, but this might be my game for a while. I mean, I'm really enjoying this, and I finally got my kind of preferred mod list, or my essential mod list for VR. So just to give you an idea of my philosophy behind this is that I'm not focusing so much on graphics right now. I know that if you're looking for like a graphical updates and how to make the game look really, really great, there's plenty of tutorials out there. There's plenty of like mod lists that you can find on YouTube. And I've been noticing that actually a lot of the videos I click on that says like essential Skyrim VR mods, they seem to be focusing a lot on the graphics. And for me, that's probably important to some of you. But for me, first, I wanted to make sure that the gameplay was as balanced and as enjoyable as possible. And the graphics I want to mess with later. Especially with VR, that could be a heavy burden for your computer already. And then if you're going to add on to that having the highest like HD texture maps and like high frame rates and things, it may cause some issues. And definitely you don't want to have low frame rates in VR. It will make you feel sick. So for me, first off, I want to get the gameplay as good as possible, and then later on I'll tweak the graphics and see exactly how far I can push my computer before it starts like freaking out. So at any rate, my philosophy for this essential mod list for Skyrim VR is, first off, we're focusing mostly on the gameplay. Graphics will come later. And secondly, I'm trying to keep things as vanilla and as light as possible. A lot of that is because I feel that once again, since it's VR and we're still in untested waters about what mods work and what don't, I wanted to make sure that I used very light mods that won't cause any conflicts for the most part. So if you are new to modding and you're kind of scared about conflicting mods and stuff, this may be a good place for you to start, because I've been testing these and they're all working very well together, and I've looked over the descriptions of each of them to make sure that they were fairly light and non-intrusive mods. So anyways, without any more delay, let's get started. All right, so top of the list, this is pretty much essential no matter what. The Unofficial Skyrim Special Edition patch. This just fixes a lot of the bugs that were already in the game that Bethesda didn't get around to fixing. I mean, I think there's literally thousands of bugs that are fixed, and I can't even go into detail about what is what, but I think that's just always a safe thing to install right off the bat. And also there's a Skyrim VR USSEP Compatibility patch. This is just a patch that makes that aforementioned special edition patch compatible with VR. It just makes sure that everything works nice and smooth in Skyrim VR. So those two will just make your game bug-free for the most part. Well, it's a Bethesda game, so it's not going to be bug-free, but it will take care of a lot of the bugs. Anyways, moving down. Okay, and now moving down the list, next we have Training Dummies and Targets Special Edition. So now what this does is it makes, you know, all those like those training dummies that you'll see, like if you go outside if you go outside the companion's place, and they're all like they have all these training dummies and like sort of targets for people to shoot arrows at, and maybe sometimes you might actually see NPCs training with those. But in the vanilla game, if you were to shoot those, it doesn't do anything. If you put this mod in there, now you can actually practice shooting in your virtual reality. You can kind of just sit back, get your arrows out, and start trying to practice your headshots and everything, which is really actually quite enjoyable. Because I think if you're playing non-VR, you're basically just putting a reticle on top of the target and pressing the click and clicking the shoot button. But in VR, it's much more immersive using archery. So just sitting there practicing with some training dummies could be enjoyable when you first get into your VR Skyrim. And with this mod, that will actually count toward leveling up your archery skill. So I'm playing an archer in this playthrough. If you aren't going to be an archer, then maybe this isn't going to be worth it, so I would skip it. But if you do want to do some archery, it's a good thing to look into. And it does add that extra level of immersion, especially when you're playing in a virtual reality space. So next up, we have Point the Way. And now Point the Way is it just adds extra signs to the world. The thing about virtual reality is that the UI is still not particularly good. It's not really streamlined for playing with a headset and like motion controllers. So you want to avoid UI as much as possible. So what this means is that you don't want to spend a lot of time looking at your map. So to avoid that and to just add another level to that immersion, I like to point the way because it adds more signs to the world. So you can just kind of walk around, follow a road, and you'll see a sign that tells you where to go. I used this a number of times when I was like traveling to a town, and I would just walk along the road, and I would come to a fork in the road, as they say, and there would usually be a sign there that would tell me which direction to take. So I think this makes the game a lot more immersive, and it also makes it easier to travel about and feel like you're really a traveler in Skyrim and not just a person playing computer gaming and pulling up a virtual map all the time. But now this by itself, the textures are a bit rough. And so when you're in a non-VR gameplay, it may not stand out that much because you're just on a 2D screen. But in VR, when you're actually standing there in front of the sign, it does look like it's kind of lacking. So I would suggest to kind of bump that up, get the HD road signs. That's the 2K and 4K. I think either one will work. I don't remember which one exactly I used, but it just bumps up the resolution for the signs so that you can really see, clearly what's written there. I did test both these out, and I think I might have put a video up where I showed the difference. But yeah, so here's just the screenshots. You can see this is before the mod. It's very rough. You kind of have to squint a little bit to make out the lettering, but then you put the mod in and it's very clear, crisp. You could read the signs very easily. So just to avoid any stress of trying to figure out what's written on a sign, I think that will help you a bit. And moving down our list, next we have upgrade your potion. And now this just goes again to the whole concept of not wanting to mess with UI a lot in your game. And so I was finding that the vanilla, just the general way that the game is set up, you have a lot of different types of potions. You have like a small healing potion, like a little vial, a bigger, large healing potion. There's just so many different variations of healing potions that I didn't want to put all of those into my favorite lists because I didn't want to have my favorite list be just a huge list of things that I have to scroll through. So I wanted to just have one potion in my favorite list that I would always use. But then the problem there is that you have all these other types of potions that don't get used. So my solution, which is not a perfect one so far, but this is the best I could find, is upgrade your potion allows you to actually go to a cooking stand. And if you have a lot of smaller potions, you can then combine those potions into bigger potions. And then that way you could you just take the bigger potion and put that into your favorites list and just use the bigger potions. And then eventually the smaller potions, as you get more of them, they'll turn into bigger potions. So eventually you get to use everything and you don't have to have every individual potion all listed into your favorites tab to kind of clog that up and just generally make a less enjoyable experience where you're spending more time going through menus than just playing the game. All right, and next up, now once again, this is still, you're going to see a recurring theme here, Weightless Overhaul. And the theme that I'm talking about is avoiding useless time spent in UI menus. So in VR, it's not fun to have to organize your inventory all the time. I'm really big on like encumbrance mods in the non-VR version. I like to really have to make choices about what I'm going to carry with me in each adventure. But in VR, that's not necessarily something I want to deal with. So what this does is it allows you to change the weight of various items like books, ingestibles like potions, poisons, food and whatnot, ingredients, miscellaneous items, scrolls, soul gems. So all those just kind of like random things that if you find in a dungeon, you're going to want to take it because you're going to want to use it at some point. I mean, it's not a decision between like taking an axe or a sword. This is a health potion. Of course you want a health potion. If you've played MMORPGs before and you've noticed maybe in the newer versions of games that they generally will have your, crafting items and like quest items and all those types of things in a separate inventory box that doesn't actually take away space from your main inventory. That's essentially what you can do with this. All those kind of random things that aren't really like main items, all these kind of things that you're going to be collecting a lot of, but you don't necessarily want to be weighed down by. This gives you the choice to make those weightless, and you can actually choose which of these you want to apply that to. So if you actually want the books to weigh something, you can do that and just make the potions weightless, or however you want to do it. If you just want the ingredients only to be weightless, you can do that for like crafting and whatnot. But essentially this is just because once again in VR, you don't want to be spending a lot of time like in the middle of a dungeon, just trying to go through your inventory and like figuring out what things you have to give up and what things you can carry. And especially with like crafting stuff, like just because when crafting items take up weight, I mean, you get into this like you get into this really annoying kind of a game situation where you go to your crafting station, but now you don't have any of this stuff on you because it was weighing you down, and you put it into like a storage box or something. So now you have to go over to the storage box, open that up, and like get all the stuff, all the ingredients that you want. Oh, but wait, now you're weighted down, so you can't walk to the crafting station. So now you have to like put down some of your swords and like other items and or like your armor, maybe change into light clothing, and then walk over to the crafting station, do your crafting, and now you want to go off and do your adventuring. So, but I don't have my weapons anymore, so I have to go back and get the weapons back and maybe put some more ingredients back. Like that is just a lot of time that is not enjoyable in VR, because I mean it could have been if it was if you weren't using UI menus and you were actually literally like picking things up and like moving them around. But as it is in Skyrim VR, it is just a port of the non-VR version. So that type of game. So that part of the gameplay is just going to be a lot of menus that aren't at all interesting in virtual reality. But now moving along, we next have mortal enemies. And now this is getting into the combat section of this, and I may have to go into more in depth about combat in a future video, but because that is really the core of what I feel you really need to adjust to get the right balance from the vanilla game. Now, to get a better idea of exactly the details about what mortal enemies do, I would suggest checking out like brodual's videos. They go into a lot of the combat mods, and they'll tell you clearly, not necessarily for VR, but just in general, what these mods do for Skyrim. But in a nutshell, this is just going to make your enemies more difficult. The difficulty settings in vanilla Skyrim, it's just a multiplier of how much damage your enemies do versus how much damage you do. So it makes you do less damage while the enemies do more damage, which has the adverse effect of turning your enemies into quote unquote bullet sponges, or I don't know, sword sponges, whatever the Skyrim equivalent of that would be. And I don't really like that. This makes the enemies more difficult in more immersive ways. And what I'm talking about specifically is the combination of mortal enemies, deadly combat, and combat evolved. So those are the three combat mods that I chose to put into this, and all three of those were compatible. Also, Smilodon and like Wildcat were some that I used to really like in the non-VR version, but I chose to kind of simplify things a bit, and I went with the other three instead for this playthrough. Once again, if you want to get more details about what those do individually, I strongly recommend the brodual mods. I'll try to put a link below if I remember to do so. But in a nutshell, you get a more challenging enemy AI. The enemies will start actually like using tactics to get to you, to like move around and like try to attack you from the sides, and they'll be more active in pursuing you as an actual threat. It can also make sneaking a bit harder, a bit more realistic. And it's going to give you a more realistic damage output. Not just you, but your enemies as well. And what that means to me in terms of immersive gameplay is that if you get hit by an axe, it's going to seriously hurt you. So you can't just sit there and take like 6 axe hits. You can't do the sort of like MMORPG tab target type of fights where you just stand in front of the person and hit them until they die, and just make sure that your hit points are bigger than your hit points are bigger than their hit points, and that their hit points go down to 0 before yours do. That doesn't work, because now you're in a situation where even if it's a low level enemy, their axes and their like swords are actually going to hurt you. And so if you're careless and just allow yourself to take damage, you're going to die very quickly. Also, it makes it where you actually have to dodge arrows. You have to really, when you see people when you see archers in the distance, you have to be aware of when they're shooting and actually like sidestep and strafe to get away from those arrows. So it is a much more challenging. It may be frustrating if you're the type of person that just wants to charge in there and not worry about actually dodging enemies. But if you like to have to dodge and to have to actually think about your attacks, I strongly recommend this. Also, the big thing for me was that when you increase the difficulties now, instead of it turning them into bullet sponges, as it were, it's a more reasonable change in the ratios of damage output there. Now, moving on to our next mod, we're dealing with survival aspects. So I definitely did a lot of survival mods when I was playing in non-VR, like like Frostfall or I Need, and like just mods that make you have to be weary of the cold and have to actually like warm yourself up and have to eat and whatnot. And those are really good mods. I do definitely recommend them. But in VR, I wanted to avoid having to do a lot of inventory management and those types of mods. That it did seem that there'd be a lot of managing your inventory, and also there are issues where you don't want to be spending forever just trying to get to the next town in virtual reality. You kind of want to like progress fairly quickly, because the amount of time that you would want to spend with a headset on, like standing and actively doing things, is, I'm assuming, going to be generally less than the amount of time you would spend sitting at a computer desk or sitting with a controller. So I think that I wanted to avoid having a lot of like redundant gameplay loops. I wanted to have a little bit of kind of a lighter version of a survivor mod. So I put in Venice Legit Food and Rest. And what I like about this is it's sort of like a needs mod where you have to eat. But instead of it being a sort of like a clockwork type of thing where like after every couple of hours, you get like a indicator that you're hungry, and then you have to eat to get the indicator to go away. It's more immersive in that the food and drinks actually do things that you'd want. So first off, it takes away your regeneration. So your health and your stamina will not regenerate anymore unless you eat or sleep. So food and whatnot is no longer about just like following a time scale or a schedule. Food is actually a mechanic which is actually more directly mixed into your gameplay. So if you are going out and you're going to adventure and you want to actually be at your best condition, you're going to eat like a beef stew or something that's going to give you a long-term benefit in terms of regeneration of health or regeneration of stamina. Whereas if you're just in town, like just kind of like crafting or whatever, and you don't actually need regeneration, you could get away without eating for a little while. It's not a big deal or whatnot. And if you're just having like a little excursion and you're not going to have a big battle, maybe just eat a potato, maybe just eat like, drink some milk or whatever, and just have like smaller benefits. So I'm finding that I do like this more than just the general time scale type of survivor mods. But I'm still kind of up in the air about whether this is good for VR, because once again, this does have you go into your inventory and have to actually find a food item. And I'm finding that in VR, that is kind of a chore at times. So I'm playing around with this right now. I may actually get rid of it in the future, just because in VR, it may not be what I was looking for, just because of the UI stuff. But if you do want to try just a kind of light survival type mod or needs mod, I definitely recommend Venice Legit Food and Rest. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this particular needs mod, but this is possibly my favorite so far. So I do highly recommend it if you want a different kind of take from the general I needs or the more popular mods that are out there. And moving right along. Now, I did say that I wasn't going to be focused on graphics, but this is kind of essential not just for graphics, but also just for immersive gameplay, because the nights in Skyrim are just way too bright. Like, it doesn't even feel like it's nighttime. The only way that you generally know it's nighttime is you could hear like the crickets chirping in the background. But like, other than that, it feels completely like it's like midday or something, or maybe just like a cloudy overcast. So I wanted to have something a little bit more immersive where I knew that it's nighttime, especially since I had the aforementioned needs mod that actually required me to sleep. I wanted to actually have a sort of cycle where I would go and I would seek shelter and sleep. So what Realistic Lighting Overhaul did is it made it so that night, it actually feels like night. And when you go into deep caverns, it is actually really dark, and you really need a torch to even see things. And this has gotten some really immersive gameplay moments. Like, there was one where I was going into, I think it was like a Falmer cave, and there was like what were those little like bug creatures called? Can't remember what they're called. If you remember, like, put it in the comments. But you could hear like the bug creatures. You could hear like the little like of them like scurrying around, but you couldn't see them because it was so dark. And then you would have like a little bit of light like coming in from the corner, and you'd see like a glint of movement, and you're like, oh crap, there it is. And then when they came, and they actually were like, I think there's like 3 or 4 of them attacking me, and I had my torch in my hand, and at first I was like, this sucks because I have to have my torch in one hand, so I don't have my shield. But then I realized I can actually attack them with the torch. So I was like jabbing forward with my torch, like not just in game, but like physically jabbing my torch into them, and then they're like being set on fire. And now them being set on fire actually lights up the area, so then I can start seeing more of the things around them, and then I'm hitting them with my sword on the other hand. It's just really great. And then there was another one with the Draugr, where you were going into this tomb, and there was just like there are graves on both sides of the room, and you hear the Draugr like getting up, and you hear like they're moaning, but it's really dark, so you can't necessarily make out where they all are, and you're kind of like turning around. It adds a lot to the experience, trust me. You do need torches though, so I did run into an issue where the torches don't last long enough in vanilla Skyrim, and it's kind of annoying to find torches. They aren't particularly easy to find, it seems, at least not in the amount that I wanted to have at the ready, because if it really sucks if you don't have any torches and you can't see anything, especially if you're at night and you don't have a place to sleep. It's not fun being in the middle of the dark. So to comment that mod, I also installed craftable torches, and this just makes it so that when you go and you find like, what was it called? Linen wrap. You find linen wraps, and then you cut yourself some firewood, and then you could go to, I believe it's on the tanning rack, I believe. Or actually, no, actually it's the blacksmith. It's the smithery place or whatever. You go there and you can actually make torches out of that. So then that gives you a good inventory of torches. Another possibility would be to look into a mod that actually lengthens the burning time of a torch so that torches last longer. But, I don't remember exactly what my thought process is, but eventually I just went for the craftable one instead. Also, this is sort of in the graphics side, and now this one really is just graphics, or well, maybe a little bit of immersion, but I found that a compliment to the lighting overhaul was the climates of Tamriel. It just gives you a little bit more variation in the climates and the weather. And this is really, really great, like especially when there's a thunderstorm or something, you actually really feel like it's thundering outside, and there's rain coming down, and it makes you really want to actually go and find shelter. But the thing about it was that I found that for some reason with the thunder in VR, even when you go inside into like an inn or something, or sometimes when I was in a dungeon and it was thundering way outside, the thunder sound would be super loud. Like you'd be like, bah! I'm not actually going to make it as loud as it was, but it would be in your ear. Like you hear the thunder over and over again. And it gets really annoying, especially when you're already inside. It's like, I'm not outside anymore. I shouldn't be hearing it this loud. So, to fix that, alternative sounds for climates of Tamriel, this took care of it right away. I just put that in. It's just like a little quick patch. And that just replaced that's really loud, annoying thunder sound for a more reasonable one. And I haven't had any issues since. So recommend getting those two together. And finally, just as a little graphical touch, I put the Ethereal Cosmos Special Edition in. That just makes the stars in the sky a lot prettier. It gives you like those sort of Aurora Borealis type of effects here. So that was quite cool. All right. And now it's time for dragons. We're almost done, but so I was talking about combat, right? And how I used those combat mods to make more realistic, more deadly, weapon damage outputs. That makes the balance really good for, humanoid battles where you're fighting like bandits or whatever. But when you fight a dragon, it feels off because the dragon you expect to actually be a bullet sponge. You expect a dragon to take tons and tons of arrows and just like brush it off like it was nothing. But with the aforementioned mods, all of a sudden the dragon is going to die fairly quickly after a certain amount, after like a fair amount of arrows or a couple blasts of your shout or whatever. So, there are a lot of mods that make the dragon stronger, but once again, in the spirit of being simple and light and compatible, I chose to go with the Simply Stronger Dragons mod. And this mod actually is super simple. All it does, it gives you a breakdown when you install it. It tells you options of how you want to set it up. You could increase the hit points of the dragons. I think it was like you can make it twice as many hit points, 3 times, maybe even 4. I think it also was an option for like 8 times if I remember correctly. I went for 4 times and it feels really good. You could also increase the damage of their breath weapon, the damage of their melee attacks. I believe I kept the breath weapon the same because with the aforementioned deadly combat mods, their breath weapon as it is, it leaves you almost dead. So I figured if I had it any higher, it would kill me in one shot, which might not be enjoyable. So I wanted to have at least a chance to survive at least 1 blast. So I kept it at 1. I may have increased their melee attack damage to 2. I don't remember exactly, but it's like that seemed like it was a good balance. And then just having them like giving them buttloads of hit points. So I gave them 4 times their regular hit points so that it really feels like an epic battle. And So it really feels like an epic battle. And when you go into a dragon fight, you have to actually really think about, like, okay, make sure I have my arrows ready, make sure I'm ready to fight this guy, and like, get your potions to like, increase your frost resistance or your fire resistance depending on the dragon you're fighting. So I think that definitely improves the dragon battles a lot right there just by itself. But now to complement the beefier dragons there, the next thing I want to install is Serio's Enhanced Dragons. And now I haven't actually tested this yet because I wanted to get my player level a little bit higher so that I could actually handle more powerful dragons and also just kind of get used to fighting the regular beefy dragons before I start like juicing them up anymore. But I'm really excited about trying this out. And what this does is basically it gives the dragons a hate system. And what that means is that as you start killing dragons, the word of the Dragonborn is going to like spread among the dragons, right? And they're going to hear like, there's the Dragonborn's here and he's trying to kill us. And they're going to get more and more upset with you. And so when you kill one dragon, then that's going to spread rumors about. And now the next time, maybe a more powerful dragon is going to come to fight you. And maybe the dragons will start. This is the interesting thing. It actually gives the dragons spells. So as the dragons come, they'll get more and more powerful spells that they can use to fight with you. And it actually gets to a point where the dragons will actually start calling other dragons to join in the fight, so that you have 2 or 3 dragons at a time that you're going to be fighting. And I like this for a number of reasons. One, I like because it's an amping up of difficulty, so fighting dragons never gets old, which it kind of does in vanilla Skyrim. When you get used to killing dragons, you just do the same thing every time. This one, it actually has some variation in the gameplay. And secondly, I like in terms of just immersion that you have this scenario now where you are the Dragonborn and the dragons aren't going to like you, they aren't going to just kind of casually attack you from time to time and be like, oh, it's the Dragonborn. No, they're actually now really upset with you because you have come to this world to kill them, essentially. So let's go into the details real quick. When you get down here to the dragon hate system, we have 10 levels of hate. Level 1, the dragon gets the Fus Roda. That's pretty basic. Level 2, a Force Blast. Level 3, a Gravity Bomb. Level 4, Fear Blast. And now you can read the description of these on your own. But just from the name of it, you could probably get an idea, like a Fear Blast, Marked for Death, Invisibility Spells, Blood Cloak, Alduin's Firestorm. It rains comets down from the sky. So you can see how there definitely is a progression in the difficulty of what you're going to be encountering. And there is a way, if it gets too difficult, there is a way to appease the dragons to kind of lower their hate. I think there was like a spell or something, but you can read that on your own if this is something you're interested in trying out. And I will be testing this over the next month or so to see how that goes as well. And if I find that there is any compatibility issues, I'll let you know. Until then, everything else that I've said in this mod list, I've been testing what I would say pretty thoroughly, and I have had no issues. So I think you could safely install all of those. If you are kind of a newbie to the modding scene and you're not sure what mods go with what mods, I could suggest that you could probably use any of the mods in this list and you won't really have to worry about compatibility issues. One thing, if you do want to do the Serio's Enhanced Dragons, this one has in the files when you download it, let's see here, it has a compatibility match for SSD. See, it says Serio's Enhanced Dragons SSD compatibility patch. That is not solid state drive. That is simply stronger dragons. That's the aforementioned dragon beefer up mod that I recommended. So if you are going to go for Serio's Enhanced Dragons, make sure you get that patch as well to make sure that it complements the SSD. So I think that's all I have for this installment of my Skyrim VR mod list. This, I would say, is all you need to get an enjoyable playthrough for Skyrim VR, at least for me personally. In the future, I may try to add on to this, kind of like beef up and maybe make specific mods for a particular player or a particular character. Like maybe if I want to do a magic user, of course, I'm going to do some more magic mods. If I want to do a particular type of like berserker character, I might do different mods for that. But for just as my essential pack of Skyrim VR mods, I think this will do it. So if I have any updates in the future, I'll add that. Until next time, live boldly and be creative.